while he does, we
gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
Transgender is something personally I have struggled with. I don't understand the surgeries to change the body's contours. I don't understand the hormone therapy. I struggle with singular pronouns, they and them. It's hard for a grammar girl. But I have two friends who are trans. They're currently undergoing gender reassignment surgeries. And I have regular contact with several other trans people who have made their transitions. I struggle with the changes they make to their bodies, but I understand their desires to live lives of deep authenticity. I understand their need to speak their truths in all possible ways. I understand their need to be accepted as the people they are, and not for the masks they had to assume, the roles they had to play to conform to other people's notions of what is acceptable or right or normal. We humans are made in infinite variety, beautiful in the magnitude of this diversity by which nature spins out the creation over and over again. Yet some of our shapes, our colors, our ways, some of these become boxes to control us, to bind us, to separate us from each other. Societies, governments, religions tell us what are the right shapes and what are the wrong ones. But who am I to make such judgment, to follow such rules of exclusion and conformity? Why would I follow when following means to move into hatred and animosity? Unitarian Universalism calls me to love and to justice, to equality and equanimity. So perhaps I don't fully understand. My reasoning ability cannot ken the transition that a trans body undergoes. But I can love. I can feel compassion. Ultimately, I can trust the experience of lives unlike my own to teach me about realities I can only imagine, never realize fully for myself. And I can honor the daring and the nerve of those who risk all to validate their authentic selves. My faith calls me to this act of welcome and of friendship. Our faith calls all of us to this act of welcome and of friendship. So for healing, for solace in this time of meditation, reflection, and prayer, I offer this poem entitled Balm in Gilead by Magda Rolling. I don't know where Gilead is, but if I did, I would fly all night through the wind and darkness. I would jump out of the plane and kiss the tarmac and ask the taxi driver to take me to the caves. He would nod darkly, knowing my need, and drive through the crowded streets, honking, and the smells of sweat-stained robes and the sounds of arguing in the market. He would not stop for the pile of pomegranates by the side of the road, nor the beggars' children with large, hopeful eyes. No, we would drive to the cool, wet caves where the balm is found in niches carved out by needy fingers. I would reach into that crevice and find the sticky balm of Gilead, smearing it on my forehead, my eyes, the back of my neck. I would listen to the beating of bats' wings and feel the balm's warmth seep into my heart, as sure and comforting as vapor rub after congested sleep. Well, we made it through another week. A little bit roughed up, still engaging in our changed world. On Facebook, instead of political news, a number of my friends have been posting photographs of golden leaf trees, right? And birds flocking as they decide to head south, and the last blown roses. Nature persists in her changes, doesn't she? And these changes are good and wholesome, even healing, part of the cycle, part of the web, part of the larger story we are a part of. I've been thinking about the web a lot this week, about the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, our seventh principle. I was thinking about how often I make a mistake when I talk about this principle, how often I accidentally interchange the word interconnected for the word interdependent. And I thought about the significance of that mistake, the difference to the story that makes to the seventh principle. In between the storm window and the window proper of my study at home, I have been watching for several weeks a spider weave a web. I sit at my desk as I write, and I only need glance a little to the left to see the web building up in the corner between the panes of glass. At some point in the last weeks, a beetle found its way into the web. I didn't witness its struggle, but I know there was one. There is always a struggle. On Friday, the spider was spinning at the beetle, or feeding, I'm not sure which, but lots of legs were moving. It's all part of nature, I know, the larger story of the eating on each other, the living and the dying. My father was big on taking me and my sister to live-action nature movies when I was a child. His way of spending limited time with his daughters. I saw lots and lots of predators hunting prey. Lions and wildebeests, bears and salmon, tigers and sambar. I didn't know the name for them back then, but I know it now. Quite a bit of carnage we witnessed on a Saturday afternoon, those stories bloody and violent. My dad is a hunter as well. He brought home lots of pheasants and grouse, rabbits and white-tailed deer. Into the pot and onto the dinner table they all went. My family was very clear on the cycle of life and where we were in that web, that story. Predators and carnivores, one and all. We were most certainly the spider. The spider and the beetle They're both on that web, living out their life stories on the web, connected by the web, interconnected. But the web is also of the spider, from out of the spider. And the beetle becomes the spider when it is consumed by the spider. And so the beetle becomes the web also, the sustenance that enables the spider to continue spinning the web. And so the web is also of the beetle. The spider and the beetle, even the web, they are not simply connected to each other, interconnected. Interconnected means they are linked to each other, contingent. But that explanation is insufficient and limited in terms of what that seventh principle really calls for. Instead, the spider and the beetle and the web, they are interdependent, symbiotic, reliant on one another. Without the one, the others aren't. They simply cease to be. Now there's another kind of mistake I make with the seventh principle, with the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Maybe it's not a mistake so much as a limited interpretation or a failure of imagination on my part. I tend to think of the web as a sign of the natural world, as the fabric of nature, with myself and all of you, as much nature as the spider and the beetle and the web, as much nature as all the predators and prey in the stories of those live action movies. It's a good story, mind you. It's a productive story to imagine ourselves as natural, to think of our bodies as extended beyond just these contours. It's a good story to remember that our bodies need fresh air and water, ample space to move around in, clean food to strengthen us and nourish us. When we tend to the earth and all its plants and animals, we are also tending ourselves because we are all interdependent. It seems so obvious why stewardship of the earth should matter to everyone. As long as we understand ourselves as interdependent, an interdependent part of all existence, and existence is understood as the natural world, environmental justice makes perfect sense. It's even a bit self-serving, isn't it? We're really taking care of ourselves. If the earth dies from pollution, we humans will not last long. As a part of nature, we are the spider and the beetle and the web itself in our interdependence. And for this interdependence, I feel immense gratitude. Nature weaves its webs that sustain my life without me asking or deserving it at all. As a part of nature, interdependent with nature, I get to live as a natural creature just because that's the way it is. We know, though, how miserably we fail at maintaining this web, how tough it is to sustain careful stewardship of the earth. Our singular and independent actions to reuse and recycle, to conserve fuel and capture rainwater, to protect endangered species from poaching and diminishing habitats. These are important. These acts are crucial. But it's so hard for us individually to keep up with the destructions of industries and governments bent on making money at the expense of life itself. Hard to combat, but still we work, we try. Without interdependent relational work, however, our individual efforts are in vain. We all need each other to bring about the world we desire. Now, that leads me to my more imaginative, less limited view of interdependence that I mentioned just a minute ago. Another shared story about the web. This story doesn't ignore the natural interdependence so much as it adds a layer to the whole matrix. What I'm talking about is human interdependence, where the web is composed of the social and cultural and political roles which we inhabit and which intersect in historically complex ways. This web of interdependence, I think, this one is more challenging to define and more challenging to honor than the web defined as nature. This social web, this calls each of us to acts of reverence and stewardship, to wholesome interdependence, but these acts are harder to discern and harder to sustain in our own ways. The benefits, the life and the living itself in that kind of interdependence are often less obvious to us. Now, working together in interdependent ways for the healing of the earth, this congregation knows a great deal about that. The commitment by numbers of you to political action on behalf of We Are Seneca Lake, the work against the fracking industry. This is worthy and beautiful work. And as a whole congregation, we have granted financial assistance to this group, another form of sustaining and interdependent effort. And we know what we are working for when we work for We Are Seneca Lake. We know that a healed natural world is the arc of that story. But imagine, though, that we might focus not on this material endpoint, but rather on the interdependent relationships among those people, all pointed in the direction of healing the natural world. Imagine that it is not the arrival south by the birds which matters so much as the way they orient themselves in relationship to each other. Imagine that it is not the spider and the beetle themselves that matter, but the way that they each make each other possible that matters. Imagine it's not only Seneca Lake that can be saved, but that our interdependent relationships with each other can save each of us, can save all of us. What I'm talking about is the social, the political, and the cultural interdependence of us human beings and the ways in which we need each other, especially in our differences and our diversity. On the one hand, it's pretty obvious that men and women need each other in order to ensure that the next generation of human beings comes into existence. The little ones are all downstairs, right? They don't need to know this. Sorry, little ones. Families can come in many shapes and configurations, but we haven't yet found a way around sexual reproduction. I mean, though, something else when I say we need our differences and our diversity, something other than a biological imperative. For one example, I turn very close to home, to this church home, to the many migrant workers harvesting in local fields and farms. Some of you know these folks intimately, those of you who do or have worked to help them learn English. You know their struggles, you know their stories, how they work to provide for families, how some of them are stranded in this country, unable to return home where they would rather be, how some of them are toiling long and demanding hours, not for themselves, but for their children, just like I do, so that those children can have a better life than the labor-full and shadowy one their adults are forced into. You know, and those of us who have some knowledge of the colonizing history of this country know that American political influence in the countries of Mexico and Latin America created the conditions that make for refugee migration. Our stuff up here created what happens down there that forces people back up here. We know that current American economic and corporate policy created the conditions that make for labor migration. These immigrants undocumented and often reluctant, are bound up with us in our differences and our diversity. It goes well beyond enjoying each other's food or colorful cloth, well beyond. The inner workings of our society, its politics and its economy, create the conditions of our living and the intersections of our living with these others. We Americans, we legal residents, none of us grocery shops, none of us prepares a meal, none of us eats without the work of our shadowy compadres. None of us. Their labor provides for our tables every day. Their labor provides for the storytelling around our dinner tables every day, for the storytelling that will happen on Thanksgiving Day, like it so often does in families. Without our needs, their labor would be unnecessary. Without their labor, we would all go hungry. We're not simply interconnected, not simply living in the same counties, traveling the same roads, proximate to each other. No, we are interdependent, needful of each other to keep our very being intact. It is precisely this interdependence on and of the web that makes it imperative that those of us with social privilege in this country stand with those whose lives are more vulnerable. That we create a story in which we are accountable to and responsible for each other. Interdependence calls all of us less at risk of oppression. All of us, where institutions don't force us into actions we don't want to take. We need to stand directly in solidarity with those more at risk because their bodies, their status, their historical places within American society put them at risk, not because of anything I did directly or that you did directly. It's simply the way the web is constructed and we're all on it. Our rational minds tell us that this is just to stand in solidarity with the oppressed, that it is right. We know what actions we ought to take, we know. But let me now give you the heartfelt words of a friend in a vulnerable position. I read them at the vigil week before last. May they help you to move beyond your reasoning mind to your feeling heart, and so becoming more aware of the risk to bodies different from our own, but with whom we share interdependence. These words are from my friend Tanya, who some of you met last summer when I preached here in July. She writes, "My dear white friends, my kids like yours went to bed confused about the world they live in. All I could tell them is that I have faith that their generation will do better. And I do have faith. But I also know I can't wait for their generation to do the work that needs to be done. Like many immigrant people of color in this country, I fear for the well-being of my family. But if you talk with many of the people of color in your life, they'll tell you that we understand defeat. We have been left behind more than once, and so we have learned to move on quickly. We know we don't have the privilege to spend too much time mourning and grieving. We must keep on going and trust that a better place is still possible. I understand your anger and frustration. I have been there too. Forget about whether you did or didn't do enough, and understand that this is the time when you're really called to act to protect those around you, to stand up for those who will face even more discrimination and hatred, and to find ways to challenge the culture of racism, sexism, classism in this country. This is the part where you don't leave us behind, because even the thought of moving away from this country, as if I could go to Canada, is a sign of my privilege. This is the part where we live into the truth that we are stronger together. So I invite you, and this is still Tanya speaking, I invite you to cry and be upset, but not to dwell there too long. We need you. We need you to work with us to build a world where we don't have to live in fear. We need you to be real allies, to be in solidarity with us. And we all still need to fight for each other, even for those who unknowingly have put their lives at risk by voting for Trump. Stay with us. The work continues now. So let us honor the interdependence to which Tanya calls us with her fearful and brave cry, to her call to action and solidarity on behalf of her children and all our children. Let us together rewrite the story. Some of us have found new work to do in the world since November 8th. Some of us have reactivated our commitments of time or dollars or actions as each's ability allows for. We've reactivated our commitments to those causes for justice that mean the most to us. Let us promise each other to answer that call to love, to answer that call to do, to act. Let us promise each other to maintain our interdependence, our needful relationship, incomplete without each other. Let us promise all of this today and every day as you remember that you are loved, you are worthy, you are needed, and you are welcome. May you feel it so.
Elected April, and say the extinguishing words with us. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go with the Spirit.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.